Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. My name is Jemma Forte and this is the show where you get to ask your questions to our trio of industry experts. So let's meet who we've got in the hot seats today. First up, we've got Tomer Aboody, who is the Director of MT Finance. Welcome. Then we have Paul Mahoney, the MD of Nova Financial. And last but not least, we've got Satyen Lakhani, the Director of Off-Market Invest. Welcome one and all. Okay, let's kick things off. I'm going to go to you first, Tomer, please, with a question, which is this. We've recently come into the property flipping business and have found a good small startup house, which we're very keen to buy. However, the property will need renovating, and we've been told a good way to go about financing this would be with a bridging loan. Yep. And the person goes on to say they admit this type of thing isn't really their area of expertise. Could you comment on the pros and cons?
Okay, so I mean, yes, it is a good option to go down the bridging loan route because it's quicker, should be quicker, faster, and less, I suppose, evasive. Okay. Regards to questionnaires and documents that have to be filled in. But most importantly is it should be more of a common sense approach behind the lender's outlook towards the purchase. There are a lot of pros and cons. I suppose most importantly the pros are it would be quicker. Most bridging lenders will lend on assets which are not uninhabitable, so they don't have a kitchen or bathroom or both, but therefore that means they can't rent them out and therefore they can't possibly get a buy-to-let mortgage. As I said before, it would be quicker. The cons are really probably slightly more expensive than a typical mortgage. But I think most importantly is as long as you're going into the purchase, you're going into the auction house and making sure that you're actually set to be able to buy the property and you've built in the costs in advance and you still believe and you still factor in that you're going to end up making a profit at the end of it, it's a great opportunity to be able to use bridging finance.
Okay.
If after you build that in and you've taken consideration of all the costs around you, including the interest, the arrangement fees, valuation fees, legals, and it doesn't make sense for you, then I would suggest just don't buy it unless you've got other means to be able to complete on the purchase.
Okay.
Because once you've committed in the auction room, then I think you're committed to being able to buy the property.
And how much quicker does a bridging loan come through? Because that often is the reason for getting one, isn't it?
Of course. I think a typical bridging loan usually takes about 9 to 10 working days, sometimes longer. Based on an auction, typically it's 28 days to complete, which should give you ample time to be able to complete the transaction, especially because once you get to an auction, the full legal pack is available. So that makes it easier for the lawyers on the lender's side to be able to have a look at the documentations, be able to have all the information in front of them. Or you can also get the valuers in either before your purchase, so in anticipation of you being able to win the bid. That means you can actually save yourselves even more time. But I think, it should take you on average 10 working days to be able to complete.
Super speedy. Thank you for that, Tomer. Okay, Paul, we're going to move on to you now. And this person says, someone I know would like to purchase a property I own outright in Wales. The property value is about 150,000. And when I purchased it, we had all the necessary searches completed. So they don't really need all this done again. They would buy the property with cash from their own house sale, which has completed. Obviously, stamp duty would have to be paid. Would there be any other taxes to be paid? And also, do you need to pay either a solicitor or conveyancer to complete the change of title with the land registry? Or is it easy to do it yourself? A bit of a cost-cutting exercise, if I could say it.
Okay, there's a few points there to cover. The first point is regards to the searches. I think that would very much depend on how long ago those other searches were done, because a lot can change.
Yeah.
So it's generally recommended you get new searches done when you're buying a property. I suppose this question seems to be by the seller, so it's not so relevant to them, but to the buyer, they want to protect themselves. So that's the first point. The second, with regards to taxes, obviously stamp duty will be payable by the new buyer, and that will differ depending on whether they're buying it as a home or whether it might be a second or third or fourth and so on purchase, given the recent introduction of a stamp duty premium for any property other than your first.
Yeah.
Other taxes to potentially consider, which again will be determined by whether the seller, whether this property is their primary place of residence or whether it's a buy-to-let property, is potentially capital gains tax, which is determined by the amount of that the property price has increased. So essentially, it's what you're selling for, less what you paid, less any capital costs. So that might be stamp duty, any costs of renovating, anything like that. So that's worth considering. And there's a few things that varies depending on the seller's personal income. If they're a lower rate taxpayer, it's at 18%. If they're a higher rate taxpayer, it's at 28%. So that's another tax to consider and find out about. I can't answer without that information. But the last point with regards to using a conveyancer or a solicitor, it's highly advised. In fact, you'd probably be silly not to do it.
Okay, you're both all nodding at that one.
I think there's a point of penny smart, pound foolish at the end of the day, because it can cost you further down the line.
I think the thing is here, they're saying somebody I know would like to purchase a property, and it seems like it might be a friendship going on here, so they're looking at ways they can do it cheaply to save one another money, but what do you think?
I think to save possibly a few £100 in order to make it could have cost you thousands of pounds further down the line, or maybe more, it could be something. So
when it comes to spending 150 grand, that's not a small amount of money for anyone.
No, it's not.
So regardless of whether you're buying it from your friend, you want to cover yourself.
Yeah, and I guess when they came to sell it next time, if those searches hadn't been done, could that be a red flag at that point to the next buyer?
Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
But I think also the fact that they might be friends, if something goes wrong, that friendship's not going to last.
No.
So by having a conveyancer or a solicitor, you've got a portion to blame to someone who's a professional. They're covered for it. So.
They say, don't buy things off friends, don't they? What if there's a leak in the roof?
100%. You don't get involved.
And also they might be buying cash now, but at some point in the future they might want to remortgage. So covering your bases there to make sure it is mortgageable is probably a good idea. Do
it by the book, because all that stuff is there for a reason.
For sure.
Okay, good advice. Right, Satyen, let's go to you for this one. Hello, I have a small amount of money that I'd like to invest in property to probably refurbish and then sell. I'm not sure how to do this and would appreciate some advice on what to do. So I'd say maybe that comes from saying I have a small amount of money. They want to know, is it possible?
I mean, it depends on how much money they've got.
Where
they're looking to buy.
General question.
Yeah,
that's hard for you to
if
answer.
anything, this is too general. They need to do their homework. They need to know. Or seek advice from someone who's done this before. They need to look at mortgage issues, they need to look at legal issues, they need to look at where they should buy, they need to look at what's their personal position in terms of if something goes wrong, have they got money to fall back on. There's so many issues. And I think we, particularly in this country, we take it for granted. You buy a property and it's as simple as that. It never is.
No.
So they need to look at and do a lot of homework. Location, professional advice, how much money they have, what they could do with that money if they didn't buy a property. So many avenues to go for. We're obviously property experts and we would say, yes, buy property. But without knowing their personal position, you can't take that decision.
You can't, advise somebody to do so. I mean, because they say a little goes a long way, but actually not in property, really.
No.
Doesn't, does it? There's so many other costs that you've got to think about.
You've got to build them all in before you make any purchase, before you go to any auctions, build the costs into it.
Right. Yeah. And would you always say have a contingency, set aside if things escalate? Or?
For sure. I think anyone you call an expert will say to you they've had themselves a situation where they assume this is going to cost them this much and it costs them that much.
Yeah.
So things will go wrong.
Yeah, you have to assume things will go wrong. And most times they do, unfortunately, when purchasing, refurbishing or developing.
I think buy property or invest in property because you've got money. Don't invest in property
because you've got a little bit and you want to make. That sounds like sensible advice. That does. Right, I think we should go for a golden nugget. Who's going to be first? Go on then, Tomer.
Okay. It's really just to mention that currently, especially in the bridging space, we're doing a lot of second charge loans, which just basically means someone's got a mortgage on either their house or an investment asset they have. They want to borrow a bit more towards investing in their business. We're doing a lot of that at the moment, helping loads of SMEs, loads of people invest into their business, launch businesses, which is helping a lot because they're finding it quite hard to having finance given to them or borrowing from the banks, and a second charge to invest towards their business, and seeing hopefully the fruits of that coming through within a year or two definitely benefits. So we're seeing a lot of that. I would always advise anyone seeking any bridging loan, any mortgage, any second charges to speak to a financial advisor with regards to that. But with regards to what we're doing, it's as long as you're borrowing towards a business and predominantly is business related, I think it's a good avenue to be able to have to help SMEs currently. And there are loans out there for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, which helps a lot of people.
Fantastic. There you go. That is a very good golden nugget. Thank you so much. Join us for more hints and tips just of that kind in the second part of Property Question Time. See you after this short break. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time with me, Jemma Forte, and my 3 industry experts. We've got Tomer, Paul and Satyen. Okay, we went into the break with a golden nugget, and I'd like another one, frankly. So Satyen, what's your golden nugget today?
One of the questions we get asked is where? Where do we go to find out where to invest? So it's not a simple process, go to Rightmove or those portals to find an investment property. So my advice to the investor is do your homework and seek advice. Seek advice from professionals like your solicitors, the mortgage experts, people that you are going to use throughout that process, and ask them about areas and which developments are going to be the good ones to look for. Go to property shows, property exhibitions. There's so many avenues you can go to in terms of finding out the right kind of person to work with, network yourself. Go and seek areas where you feel that I want to invest in, and then go to those areas. Do your homework. Speak to the local store or something like that, just to give you an idea as to what that development or that area is going to be doing.
Okay.
But don't just go in blind, go into a Rightmove or that kind of portal. Not that they don't have properties there, but you're not going to find an investment property glaring at you. You need to do your homework on that.
Yeah, okay, fine. You've got to put the hard work in to find those good opportunities. That sounds very, very wise. Okay, so we're going to get on with some questions now as well from viewers. So I'll go back to you, Tomer. Let's find one for you. Now this person wanted to know about buying off plan and says, to what extent can they be involved with what actually happens during the build? Yeah, so if you're just looking at literally a floor plan.
At that point, I'm pretty sure there's quite a bit of influence you can have with regards to your internals, whether it's different granite or different taps or certain, possibly even certain walls being moved in certain areas, as long as it's not external walls or something which is going to be really structural. But if it's an internal wall and you want to make your bathroom slightly larger or slightly smaller, or some people I know have taken a 3-bedroom and made it into a larger 2-bedroom because that suits them. Maybe it's not great for investment, but it suits them on that particular situation. So I think the earlier you come in, the more involvement you can have and a bit more influence.
Okay.
But I wouldn't advise to someone to say that's always going to happen. It just really depends on the developer and the development themselves.
Okay.
Just to comment on that, the changes that you might want to make should be determined by what that property is going to be used for.
Okay.
You know, if you're buying it as your home, of course you're going to tailor it to what you want and like, and that's fine if the developer will let you. If it's a buy-to-let, then it's nothing to do with what you like. You know, it's not about what you like. That might seem strange, but it's about what the target market likes and what makes the most sense as an investment. So if that's the case, being commercially minded and completely unemotional, not really viewing it as a property, you know, as an investment is important.
Okay, yeah, fair
Don't
enough.
make it too unique.
So don't put like really flowery tiles in or whatever because you like them.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Although quite nice.
Oh, nothing wrong with flowery tile.
I love a flowery tile.
Yeah,
I
it
really
might
love
not be
flowery-
suitable for that particular market.
And also, I suppose the builder, to a certain extent, doesn't want someone irritating them, going, "Can you
Correct.
move that wall? Can you do
Correct.
this?" Can you do like all their little whims, I suppose.
I think it's within reason.
Yeah. So they'll probably have like a base budget, will they? They say like, well, we're going to get this type of kitchen. If you want that type of kitchen, you've got to give us a bit more money.
Correct. I think a lot of times that would work that way.
Yeah.
In some cases, they won't let you make any changes,
No.
and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No.
Yeah. Okay. They've got like a job lot on beige paint or something.
Yeah, or you trust what their, I suppose, interior designers have designed and said this is suitable for this particular market in that local area.
Yeah.
And that's why they're building it to that kind of standard, that kind of level,
Yeah.
and using those colours because they've been advised that that's going to be the best seller.
Okay.
So then, don't go too.
Don't go too crazy.
extreme.
Yeah, I think I'd probably be tempted if it was like for my house. I'd be really irritating. Hello, hi, I've got some more ideas. They'd be like, oh God. Right, so.
Also, don't forget, sorry,
Oh, go on,
the
go on.
developer also has to comply with regulation as well. So
Right.
what you're buying into comes with, today's urgent requirements.
Yes.
That they come to a higher level of standard, and the more neutral it is, the more it appeals to a majority of people.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're going to rent, as Paul has said.
Yeah, okay. Right, Paul, this one's for you. Someone says, after my home was flooded during a flash flood incident, oh nightmare, my insurance premiums doubled year on year. What upset me was that flooding was no longer covered and there was a huge excess for any subsidence claim. Insurance companies, eh? If I paid for a full survey to be done that showed that there was no damage, would that be a credible way of fighting for a lower premium?
Potentially. Although, in my experience when dealing with insurers, it's kind of their word goes. They're a bit of a law unto themselves.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean there's no solution. You don't have to stay with that insurer.
True.
And again, we've discussed this already, but the value of advice there is massive. There's so many insurers out there. There's so many different insurance products. Determining for that specific, somewhat unique situation, what the best product to solve that problem would be is pretty important.
So maybe go to a broker?
More than likely go to a broker or an advisor, You'd likely have to disclose what's happened previously, but there should be some insurers that will overcome that. Especially if your premium's doubled, well, your premium's probably pretty high now. There might be some insurers that might be more expensive than the mainstream ones, but will cover you for what you want to be covered for.
Okay. It's a difficult situation to be in.
I think keep it simple as well, because when you get a flash flood, it's not usually just the one property. It could be your neighbours as well. So find out what they're doing.
Yeah,
Who are
that's
they
a good
insured
point.
with?
Yeah.
You've got to
Get
look at
together
all
and
the
have an
options.
insurance coffee morning.
Because maybe their existing insurers have actually agreed to cover them, so why don't you speak to them also?
Yeah. We could go job lot. Here, we've got the whole street.
Could be.
Yeah, get a discount.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, Satyen, question for you. Someone says, I'm considering buying a new build, off-plan again, a lot of people buying off-plan, an off-plan resale. Ooh, this is different, i.e. not from the developer, but from someone that purchased the property from the developer and then stuck it on Rightmove. Is this generally considered safe, and what are the associated risks?
If it's something that the previous seller has completed, then I think you assume it like a normal transaction.
Yeah.
So you'll have your solicitor that will speak to their solicitor to make sure all the documentation is in order, etc., etc. And the key thing there is if it's a new build property, built now, then you'll have some of the guarantees that should come with it as well. The guarantees on the white goods, guarantees on the build. So all these factors your solicitor will take advice on, or will look at the documentation and advise you on whether it's right or wrong.
Okay.
So just treat it as a normal transaction, trust your lawyers to make sure they're doing the right work. Plus, if you're going to take out a mortgage, they'll insist on that documentation anyway.
Okay, fair enough.
Just a
Thank
point
you.
there.
Yeah.
Certainly trusting your solicitor is very important, but making sure you have the right solicitor. Because, unfortunately, in my experience, some conveyancers don't give good advice or don't pick certain things up.
Okay.
So making sure you have someone who actually knows what they're doing.
Okay.
Because if you are relying on the advice, although you might be covered by the professional indemnity insurance, you want to be aware of what you're doing, and that's what their job is.
Okay, well, I tell you what, just picking up on the Rightmove thing, here's a question that I'd be interested in. If Rightmove advertised a property and then there was something legally dubious with it, would Rightmove be at all accountable? Or not?
I'm pretty sure. No, I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure.
I mean,
no, I'm pretty sure
so
yes.
you've got to be careful. You can't
would more
assume
likely
that
be
Don't
everybody-
rely on that.
No, I wouldn't
Okay.
rely on that. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure that Rightmove have all the
disclaimer.
terms and disclaimers.
Yeah. They
There's
probably
not-
can't check
no.
all the
You're not going to
properties
go
that
through
go
all of
up.
them. I'm pretty sure you should depend on your own knowledge, but most importantly, on
Yeah.
the correct solicitor to give you the advice, advising
Yeah.
to check all your documentations in advance.
That is exactly the type of
Yeah.
situation where, again, like you were saying, it's about having the right professionals, because it's a minefield, isn't it? It's not legally easy just for people off the street to navigate these things on their own.
And I suppose keep in mind that in some cases, the conveyancer doesn't necessarily cover all bases of the advice you might need.
Right.
You know, because they don't tend to be very commercially minded.
Yeah.
They're solicitors, you know, they do it by the letter of the law, what's written in black and white. And in some cases, it might be worth seeking other forms of advice to interpret that.
Okay. And also, I'd probably want to ask the question, why did that buyer put it on Rightmove so early?
Yeah, I mean, it could be the fact that they bought it, I suppose, put a deposit down a few years ago, the market they believe or they've seen has gone up in that particular area, and cashing in on potential profits.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as they've completed, sometimes, there could be an
Change of
assignable, there's also an
circumstances.
assignable lease that they're doing, but then once again, that's even more of a quagmire to go down. So I would advise.
Even develops further, that you're buying that property because you like something about that.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at Rightmoves, you might find other properties. So if you're going for that specific property, there's something you like, so okay, go with your motive there, but get more information.
Another potential risk on that is that a lot of lenders want someone to have owned a property for a minimum of 6 months before
Right.
they'll let you buy it from them with a mortgage to avoid flip type situations with big uplifts. That's following a lot of issues that were run into in the previous financial crisis with major uplifts in value and then major dips in value. So considering that as well.
Okay, thank you. Right, last but not least, we've got one more golden nugget. Paul, I'm looking at you.
I've got one. So as of 30th of September,
Yeah.
so a few days ago, the Prudential Regulatory Authority, the PRA, has brought in new regulations for lending to portfolio landlords. So that's anybody who owns more than 4 properties. And the regulations are with regards to providing more information. Pretty well all lenders have interpreted them differently, but the standard is that essentially professional landlords will need to have business plans in place. Some will need to have cash flow analysis. So it's more of a professional approach to having a portfolio of properties. So it's important if you are a professional landlord, if you're planning to be a professional landlord, that you understand what your requirements are there for being able to get finance, and that I suppose you go down the right avenues to not get yourself into trouble, because things will be different to what they were not so long ago.
Yeah, it's amazing how the laws change very quickly within your world.
Yeah.
Can't almost keep up.
Yeah.
Do you find it something that, because you've got so many different sort of layers of expertise, do you find it quite difficult to keep on top of, or do you have to hire other people to keep on top of it?
I think like anyone, everyone gets advice.
Yeah.
You have to. You got to
Yeah.
make sure you stay on top of them and make sure that you abide by them. I think if anything, I suppose it should protect the consumer, the investor, the borrower, and if that's the issues, then it's a good thing.
Yeah.
But there's quite a lot being thrown at you, but it's make sure that you keep up to date with them.
It's definitely important to have your finger on the pulse.
Sure.
You can't rest on your laurels in this industry. You need to be aware of what's happening.
Keep reading.
You're always learning.
Yeah.
You're always
Yeah.
learning.
And I guess property lawyers are always working.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what I need to tell my kids to
Very
do.
hard. Very hard. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
mean, definitely good professional.
Excellent. Right, any last words of wisdom before we go? Anybody want to pop anything else in off the back of the golden nugget?
I think the one thing we all agree on is homework and
That
have the right
seems to be
advice.
the thread that is coming through, that these days there's not like an easy buck to be made. You've got to really research, haven't
A
you?
lot of things online, on TV, make you believe they're just easy.
Yeah.
It's not as easy as it looks.
No.
Make sure you get advice throughout the process, whether
Yeah.
it's through financial advisor, the lawyers, the developers, people around you. See what others have done and make sure you can afford it, I suppose.
Yeah,
I think another important point is, because we've been talking a lot about advice and buyer beware and potentially some negative things which may turn people off but shouldn't. An important point is there's still a lot of money to be made and retained within property.
Okay.
The property market, in my opinion, is still without doubt the best asset class for the vast majority of people.
Okay.
So it's still a good investment. Don't believe the hype about buy-to-let being dead, because it's not. But make sure that you're doing it right.
Okay, great advice. Take professional advice and go for it if you think you can afford it. It's a message, yes. Measured, but have fun. Right, that's it for today's property question time. And if you've got questions, you're thinking, I would love to ask them this, well, then you can. You can either go to our website, which is allthews.property-tv.co.uk, and have a look at things there, or email us directly, info@property-tv.co.uk. It's been a joy. My name's Jemma Forte, and thank you to my 3 guests, Satyen Lakhani, Paul Mahoney, and our lovely Tomer Aboody. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.